p.m. in the council chambers located at 209 Lemonwood Drive, Castle Hills, Texas. We're going to call this Castle Hills regular city council meeting to order and determine if a quorum is present. A quorum is present. We're going to start with the invocation. Tonight we have Mr. Scott Austin, who lives here in Castle Hills with his wife Shannon and two young boys. We're excited to have you. Please.
All right, well, thank you guys for having me. I am a pastor of a church called the Park Community Church. We planted it 10 years ago, and we have 3 different locations here in San Antonio. And so one of them is just north here of Castle Hills, and my wife Shannon and I have lived here for 7 years now. And so we're just grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be here tonight, and we're excited to be a part of the community. And so if you guys would, let's bow our heads and let's say a prayer. Father, we thank you for the provision that you have given us of representative democracy, of freedom of expression, and the opportunity to be productive and helpful citizens, the opportunity to participate, to take active roles through voting, through our service, and through our kindness. And so tonight we pray that you give our leaders wisdom, you lead them in words of kindness and support, you work through them to seek consensus for a greater good, and that in all things we do tonight as we represent our city, our state, and our nation, that you remind us of the great burden and gift leadership and stewardship. Grant us favor tonight as we continue on, proceeding in wisdom, asking for favor. We pray these things in the name of God. Amen.
Thank you so much. Next we have the Pledge of Allegiance. One last time from Captain Covey before he promotes. Chief Siemens.
Mayor, council, city staff, and citizens, thank y'all for coming out. Unfortunately, we won't be doing our announcement, our award ceremony this evening. We had several items that came up that are going to hinder that. We're very fortunate that Romeo Corporal Munoz came back today, light duty. That said, when the DA's office found out about that, they quickly subpoenaed him for a sexual assault case that he was the arresting officer on a couple of years ago that's going to trial this week. So part of his light duty orders, no more than 8 hours a day. As such, we've exhausted that, and we're not looking forward to pushing that by having him here tonight for these awards. Further, we had another sergeant who was our supervisor of the year that went out injured late last week. Since he couldn't make it here, we thought we would just reschedule at a more convenient time for all parties. So I know that everybody came out here for that tonight, and I applaud that and appreciate it. But that said, we will be postponing, and I apologize.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Chief?
Okay. Residents, mayor, council members, and city staff, thank you for your time this evening to join me in promoting Captain Kurt Covey to the rank of Assistant Fire Chief of Castle Hills Fire Department. Captain Covey has 16 years total firefighting experience with 12 years of experience with the Castle Hills Fire Department. Captain Covey has a bachelor's degree in Fire Emergency Services Administration from Texas A&M San Antonio and holds certifications as Master Firefighter, Master Inspector, Instructor, and Plans Examiner with the Texas Commission on Fire Protection. I am confident that Captain Covey will continue to be an asset to the residents in the city of Castle Hills as the Assistant Chief of the department. I would like all of you to join me in the presentation of his badge and swearing in as the new Assistant Chief of Castle Hills Fire Department. Kurt. Raise your right hand. I, Curtis Covey, do hereby declare
I, Curtis Covey, do hereby declare
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Texas,
the Constitution of the State of Texas,
my fellow firefighters I serve with,
my fellow firefighters I serve with,
and as an officer of the Castle Hills Fire Department,
and as an officer of the Castle Hills Fire Department,
my fundamental duty is to serve the people,
my fundamental duty is to serve the people,
to safeguard and preserve life, health, and property
to safeguard and preserve life, health, and property
against fire and other perils,
against fire and other perils,
and to maintain a proficiency in the fire service.
and to maintain a proficiency in the fire service.
I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of the fire department.
I recognize the badge of my, say it again.
I recognize the badge of my office
I recognize the badge of my office
as a symbol of the fire department.
as a symbol of the fire department.
I make these promises so solemnly, freely, and upon my honor.
I make these promises so solemnly, freely, and upon my honor.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Okay, next we will have citizen comments. We only have 2 people signed up. First, we have Ms. Judy Crawford.
Good evening, Judy Crawford, 107 West Castle Lane. I'm just wanting to let people know that this is time now if you would like to join the CHCO, the Castle Hills Community Organization. Dues are due every January, so if you did not pay in January, you are due. If you'd like to rejoin or join for the first time, we'd love to have you. So we're taking money and applications out here, or you can go to the city's website, go to the community section at the top of the first page and scroll down to community organization. Click on it and then scroll down to community organization and you can do PayPal. I've also been working, this is in progress, on our website. We have castlehillscommunityorganization.org and you can pay on that website as well. And you can also learn about Fiesta and our upcoming Easter egg hunt and those kind of things. And we also have Fiesta medals for sale today for $10 a piece. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Mr. Clyde McCormick. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I apologize, I forgot the process and did not sign up at the beginning, but I just wanted to make a brief announcement. On behalf of the Castle Hills Garden Club, we want to invite you and the Castle Hills community to a presentation entitled Making the Most of Every Drop of Water in Your Lawn and Landscape. It will be presented by Anna Vogler. She's a horticulturalist and master gardener on Tuesday, March the 10th at 10 a.m. in the Castle Hills Community Room. We do invite, and please join us for this important discussion and conservation presentation. Thank you for obliging me.
Thank you. Okay, next we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are self-explanatory by the City Council or have been previously discussed and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests. The consent agenda is for consideration by the City Council only and not subject to public discussion. Do I have a motion? Mr. May.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a first and we have a second. Do we have a discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. First, we'll move on to the new business. We have a presentation discussion on the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. We have former Councilman, San Antonio Councilman John Clamp here with us today.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. City Manager, do you want to say a few words before I get started? Okay, good.
Mr. Clamp, we might just ask you to speak up because I heard some of the
Okay.
residents struggling to hear.
Okay. That's a
Mayor-
little bit better.
Mayor, real quick before, just to preface Mr. Clamp being here to provide this presentation. Mr. Clamp obviously is with ACOG and is running the PACE program, and he thought it would be obviously in the best interest to do this presentation for the city of Castle Hills for potentially a project. Right now, considerable one like the former Wedgwood, now Ensemble. I met with the owner and developer and Mr. Clamp about possibly that property and/or that development being engaged and benefiting from this PACE program. So Mr. Clamp has been going to cities and counties to let them know about this particular program, and if cities are interested in participating to help similar developments like the new Ensemble at the former Wedgwood. So, Mr. Clamp.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mayor, thank you for having me. Council members, it's a pleasure to be here. I've got about a 30-page briefing, but I'm going to do it very fast because it's kind of just an overview. The next time I come out, if the council desires, I'll go into a little bit more detail, so I'll do it pretty fast. Again, John Clamp, CFO for ACOG, Alamo Area Council of Governments, and I've been CFO there for about 4.5 years now, and it's been a fantastic journey so far after my council day, so thank you for your service as well. I will let you know that since probably late last year, August, September timeframe, we started rolling out the PACE program, and Comal County was the first to adopt. Judge Krause, Medina County, Judge Schuhart, City of Hondo, City of Leon Valley. Just recently, City of Fredericksburg adopted the program as well. City of San Antonio is scheduled for March 5th for final adoption, and we're working with City of Converse, Universal City, and several others. So as my day job completes during the day, I come out at night and do the PACE program. So I'll go over, if pleases the council, to do a really quick presentation. So thank you very much. So what is PACE? It's not the picante sauce, just to let you know, but PACE is very simple if you just step back and look at it. It's Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's really innovative financing for commercial building improvements, and it's money for property owners to save energy or water on their buildings or industrial buildings or residential over 5. So it's really pretty simple concept. It's all market-based, so you don't have to worry about the government coming in and letting your citizens know, your business owners know that you have to comply with this specific program in terms of who you're going to use, which bank you're going to use, those kinds of things. Purely market-based. And usually about this time, one of the judges will ask me, what's it going to cost me? And I always tell them it's going to cost you $0. This is all, again, a market-based program, 0 investment by the city, nothing on your balance sheet, nothing on your liabilities, none of those things. So it's really a win-win for everybody. So really, this program identifies how we improve your buildings here in Castle Hills. You've got a perfect example of Wedgwood building down the street. Perfect opportunity for them to use this program to reduce their interest rate cost so that they can, number one, finish the rehab, get it on the tax rolls, and start making it a financially viable project. So really, PACE does that for them. Bottom line, just lowers their total overall interest rate cost, so it makes it attractive for them. Again, just a real quick picture. It's going to lower the utility cost. The major point of PACE is that the overall savings have to exceed the overall cost. So if you have a project that costs $100,000, if you have $101,000 in total savings, it qualifies for the project. Would you do it or not? Another question. But as long as the savings exceed the cost, the property owner will qualify for this program. Also increases their building value as well. So if you have buildings that have been sitting vacant or are dilapidated or need rehab, this is a perfect program for this to help as well. Usually, contractors say, hey, let's improve this property, it's gonna cost $50,000. It's tough for owners to really put $50,000 down and recapture their costs quickly, so you have all that negative cash flow in those first few years. PACE actually takes the cost and spreads it out over the average life of the useful investments for that project. So it makes it 100% financing over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depending on the life of the projects that building does. Again, you can see here, what does PACE do? That repayment through an assessment is lower than the savings, so it helps the operating costs of the building. That either goes to the benefit of the building owner, or if you're a tenant, it should lower your CAM, your extra costs for energy and utilities, those kinds of things. Again, what is PACE? Again, 100% long-term financing for energy efficiency projects, solar, chillers, LED lighting, low-flow toilets, water faucets, any kind of energy management system or water management system, this program will those projects will qualify for this program. Again, multifamily over 5, industrial and commercial properties, and also for nonprofits as well. So this is a good program for nonprofits. Oddly enough, we have a lot of interest right now from the Archdiocese of San Antonio. If you think about what their portfolio looks like, it makes perfect sense. So real quickly, here's how it works. You find a contractor. Let's say I'm a building owner. I find a contractor, select a project, whatever those energy projects are, identify a capital, a lender, apply for the PACE program. The owner signs multiple contracts with the PACE program. The capital provider signs a contract with the county for the assessments. You do the funding, complete the project, goes on the tax rolls, and then those savings start. That's really basically, in a nutshell, what happens for the PACE program. What do? Well, you listen to a guy like me that talks about the PACE program. It really is an adoption type of program. That's all you really have to do. And then hopefully you'll have several of your business owners call either the city manager's office or one of the elected officials. You call me if you select ACOG as the administrator, and we take it from there. But we've actually already met a lot of interested parties, and we've already got them in our database, and we're working with them right now. We just need the formal adoption. So the only things that you need to do is post a report on your website. The city manager's office does have that. You pass a resolution of intent, and that resolution of intent has a public hearing date and time. Hold the public hearing. Usually nobody really asks a lot of questions. After the public hearing, you close the public hearing, and then finally adopt a resolution establishing the program. You're done. You'll see me, or I'll have a report once a year. If there's a lot of activity, which I hope there is, I'll maybe be by a little bit more often, but usually just once a year. And that's it. Again, no cost, no investments. If you wanted to, as a city, you could package up some incentives, but not necessary. This is in the CPS energy service area, so there will be CPS energy rebate credits available for project owners that decide to use PACE program. Local government benefits really just save utility costs, reduces demand on your electricity grid, all those kinds of things, enhances your economy. Hopefully you have some contractors and lenders in the city that will participate, and I will actually go talk to some of those if they're very interested, so just let me know and I'll be happy to go talk to them. And if you have any separate energy conservation goals, this will help with those as well. Again, very little risk to the local government. If by chance a property owner does not pay, it basically reverts to like a property tax bill. So that assessment goes to your probably Linebarger, I'm not sure who it is, but if it's them, goes to them and you collect penalties and interest. Really your benefit is the increased value on your tax rolls and helping that commercial property owner do these investments and save interest while operating his or her business. Again, really for the property owner, just innovative financing, long-term amortization. It's almost like buying a house. property value enhancements so they can use credits or other incentives if they're allowable. Lender benefits, really unique for the lender. It's a very secure investment since it's an assessment through the county tax records. It takes a first lien on that property. Usually these liens are no more than 20%, and kind of was taking a while for the banking industry to jump on board that this is still good for their particular project. So if there's a property owner, they'll go talk to their first lien lender first to make sure that this is okay. If not, then it won't work and they'll use traditional financing. But it's really good for everybody, improves the office building, and it really enhances the collateral for all the lenders. Again, here's our ACOG region, just as a reminder. We serve 13 counties, over 12,500 miles, and I've probably gone to the very top and very bottom here in the last couple of months, so it's a great area for us. We talked about who's already involved, Medina County and some other cities. So far, as you can see from the slide, 2015 didn't have any investments. Again, this passed in 2013, but the way that the Texas PACE Authority did this was to really do it right. The PACE Authority, Texas PACE Authority, wants to make sure that the credibility of this program stands the test of time, and that there's no shortcuts, there's no nefarious things, that we comply with the spirit of the state statute and make sure that energy savings does actually occur. And there's actually a firm that will track the savings for us. So through, and this is not Texas PACE Authority, it's not ACOG, but through 2019, there's been $100 million in lended funds for a total of 26 projects. So it's catching on. And it's just growing every day now because the market is getting used to what is PACE, how does it work, let's do it. So you have at least one or two interested parties in your city that are ready to move forward. Again, this is the group that will track all the energy savings. Here's just a few examples. A small project in Dallas, $74,000. Their annual energy reduction was 92%. You've got a project in Houston, annual savings of $185,000 after a whole bunch of HVAC and LED lighting and controls. Some nonprofits, smaller assessments, $260 for family elder care, annual savings of $20. You may not think that's a lot of money, but when you're a nonprofit and you're trying to make ends meet, $20,000 a year is a huge deal. Couple of other examples. You've got some industrial examples. Simon Property Group, big outfit. The assessment was $10 million, and they're saving 7.3 million kilowatt hours and 60 million gallons of water. So this really does have an impact on our electric grid and our aquifers around the region. And of course, hospitality, big user. This will be the hospitality industry will definitely use this program. Oops. Again, in that far right-hand corner, it's kind of a lot of graduate school math, but basically it just reduces your overall interest costs. Think of it as a house. If the market rate is 4, if you can use a special program, you can probably get a mortgage for 3.5. You're saving half a point over 30 years, a lot of money, and it gives you the financing to make these projects happen. We talked a little bit about the documents. It's very structured, very uniform. Everybody basically uses the same documents throughout the entire state. They wanted to make it consistent. Again, it's a win-win for everybody, the property owners, contractors, lenders, the entire state of Texas for their energy and water conservation goals, and the communities that we live in. Hopefully, some of your lending institutions in your cities will jump on board. I'll go talk to them. Going to Church Bank and Trust, Bank of America, a couple of others. So whoever's interested and really understands the program, this will be a new market niche for them. So Mayor, that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, I'll be back at some point in time if you all decide as a council you want to do the resolution of intent. I'll work with the city manager's office to make that happen and make sure all the paperwork's in order. But again, I know there's you have a property owner for Wedgwood that is very interested in making this happen, which will be good for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Klemp. Council?
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Gregory?
You said that this gives enhanced collateral for lenders. Enhanced collateral for lenders.
Yes, it could be, yes, with the investments in
be.
project. Well, it will be.
Can you define how that is?
Well, if you have a building that needs improvement, let's say a water management system or an energy management system, that will improve the operations of the building, save them money, good for the lender. If you install a new chiller or a boiler or solar on the property, all those things will enhance that collateral because that building is operating more efficiently.
So this is more efficient than amortization? If you're going to put in a new widget, you usually amortize it over the life of the widget. So is this something that's better than that?
It's not so much better as it is, depending on the life of the, let's say it's the chiller and the boiler and solar, you take an average of those three projects and amortize it over that average life of those three projects added together. And if the energy savings and water savings over that life of the project exceeds that cost, it's a good project to do. And really the property owner has the choice of doing it for 10, 15, or 20 years. Can't go over that average life, but it could do a little bit lower if the property owner wants to.
Does the federal government have any part of this?
No, sir.
Does the state government?
Only in the statute. The state of Texas actually adopted the statute, Section 399. This is their statutory program for PACE. But in terms of implementing the program, they won't have any input. It's all market-based. So if I'm an owner, I'll go to Bank of America, Schertz, or IBC, any of those banks, and say, I would like to do this program. Are you on board? Number one. Need to take a senior lien. Number two. I want to choose XYZ for my contractor and ABC for my engineer. Yes, you can do that. So the council won't have any involvement after the adoption period because it's all market-based after you adopt it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Winger? Mr. Ray?
Mr. Mayor, I propose that we express an intent tonight from the City Council to pursue this program and that it be calendared and that the city manager place it in the appropriate resolution format for future consideration.
Okay, do we have a second?
Mayor, excuse me, but this is not an action item tonight. I think Mr. May's recommendation is in the record, and if someone objects to that recommendation, they can say so during the discussion. But it's not proper for there to be any action taken tonight by the governing body based on the wording of agenda item number 1. Excuse me, Mr. Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Snow. Mr. Sanderson, please.
I just have a question. So is there any extra encumbrance when it comes to transfer the sale of the property itself? Any extra contingencies or things that must happen because of the additional financing stuff that's going on there?
So when a property owner decides to sell, two things can happen. They can pay off this deed of trust on this particular PACE program, or it runs with the land. So the new property owner will just take it over as just an additional cost for that property.
So it can be inherited, I guess, if that's a proper term, probably not the
Yes,
correct
sir.
term, but inherited for the next property owner then.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Isbrand.
Mr. Clamp, thank you first of all for being here tonight. Appreciate your presentation. Just a couple questions. On your one slide, Texas PACE by the numbers, you start your reference at 2015. Is that when the legislation was adopted?
The legislation was actually adopted in 2013.
2013.
And they spent those through 2, 3, 4 years developing the consistent documentation, the technical standards there's a whole document of technical standards on energy efficiency and savings. You don't want me to give that presentation because it would probably bore you, but they're very rigid and rigorous and really the foundation of the program. Remember, this is a Texas-wide program, so you need those strong technical standards for buildings because you want to prove to the state at some point in time that you're doing the program correctly, or they'll probably revoke it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I also wanted to ask on the summary of this agenda item that the city manager gave us. It referenced activity, I guess, in Medina County, Comal County, City of Honda, City of Fredericksburg, and City of Leon Valley.
Right.
Is that the extent of what is in the San Antonio metro area or in the ACOG service area?
Oh, no, there's quite a bit more. So if a county adopts the program, the cities are automatically included. So like Medina County, the city of Hondo didn't have to do it, but they were on a fast track to see who could do it faster, so I just let them do it. City of Fredericksburg, they're not going to wait on Gillespie County, and so I have probably a laundry list of 20 local governments that I'm still going to see, and it's probably all the Northeast, all the cities, you know, Converse, Live Oak, all those cities, and then kind of work my way out, because really the major use of this program is within the bounds of 1604, for most likely. A lot of the industrial, the hotels, the downtowns, Loop 410, 1604, those types of buildings. So we're working with the city of San Antonio to make that happen, and then work our way. Y'all have a very unique opportunity here where this program would be beneficial.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
Ms. Winger?
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little unclear. The city has to approve this, but the city doesn't invest anything, and the city has no liability.
Exactly.
And why does the city have to approve it?
Because under the state statute, the local government has to adopt the program so that citizens within your city boundaries can use it.
And the idea is that ultimately it's beneficial to the city because of what, higher property taxes, or?
It's just a good program for energy efficiency goals for the state of Texas and usually local governments. That's just the way they did the statute.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Mr.
Yes.
Gregory?
I believe it was before I was.
Mr. Gregory?
I went through the financial crisis of '09, and one thing I learned to look for is words such as innovative financing. Who benefits, what can go wrong with this if this is passed?
The worst thing that can go wrong is a property owner can't pay that assessment, the loan back to the lender. And what happens is there's notices for the property owner and the lender. Most likely the lender would probably take it over, but it would be just like a property tax assessment that went bad in terms of somebody in the city of Castle Hills. The government will get their interest and penalties at some point in time because they'll put a lien on that particular property for non-payment.
Well, does this, I can see where this can be abused a lot. Because you can have a lot of people doing a lot of things with no expectation of making any money, but just taking advantage of the process here. And then walking away from it when things get bad, and the lender is stuck with it. Stuck with a building that may not have been built.
Right.
Or may not have been renovated, and now they've got an enormous amount of debt that they would not otherwise have on the books, they now have it. How does that avoid that pitfall?
So let's say you're a property owner, you have really two gates to go through. Your primary lender, your first lien mortgage, to make sure that they're okay with it. And number two, the lender who's going to lend you the money on the property, they're going to do an underwriting process just like any other loan. So if there's abuse, it'll be caught at that particular time. And for the PACE program, you have to do the underwriting and the technical standards to make sure that you still qualify. So it's not like you could just say, okay, we're going to do PACE today. It's a little tougher than that because of the technical standards in the program itself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Sanderson?
So we have at least one property that I'm aware of where we have issues where we have, like the city and the state and the county that are all kind of lining up after a property has been, foreclosed upon. So does this in any way multiply the problems of a city when it comes to collecting dues to them from, a bankrupt owner?
I don't think so, Councilman. I think you may, if you do two PACE loans in 2 years, I'll be really happy. It's not a program where everybody's just going to say, okay, let's go out and do PACE. Number one, you have to have the economies of scale because the PACE program charges a 1% fee on the first $5 million. a half a point from 5 million to 20 million, and a quarter point from 20 million on. So you got to have a pretty decent sized property to make the numbers work.
So these aren't single families, this is multifamily at best then?
This is multifamily over
Okay,
5.
okay, thank you.
Industrial properties and commercial office buildings and hotels. Thank you. You're probably thinking of a California residential program has PACE. That's a whole nother question.
Mr. Clamp, just to clarify, if I understood correctly, you said that if the county enacts this, then we're automatically included in this?
Yes, sir.
So at which point it would be a moot point in the city of Castle Hills?
Yes, although Bear County is not on track to adopt.
Okay. And that just to clarify, that includes solar panels for small businesses?
Solar panels for a property that qualifies under the PACE program.
Okay.
Small business, I assume they would own a building or a commercial building or an
Sure.
industrial building, one of those. Yes, sir.
Ms. Winger?
Why is Bear County not on track to adopt?
We've been trying to work with them. They're just, I don't know what's in the judge's mind.
Who are you working with there?
The commissioners, the county manager, and we've even spoken to the judge.
So they haven't expressed any concerns?
We have not brought it before them as a public body. They're just not interested at this time.
Mr. Sanderson?
I withdraw.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Clamp.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, next we have the public hearing on proposed amendments for the recommendation by the Zoning Commission regarding revisions to Chapter 50 of the Code of Ordinances. Mr. Rapley?
Mayor, this is for the public hearing on Chapter 50. I'll see if anybody signed up. I'll go grab the sheet. Is any-
Okay, I have one person signed up, Mr. McCormick. So it's 7:07. We're going to open the public hearing.
Clyde McCormick, 207 Carrollwood. I have made some of these recommendations or discussions in the past, and so I'm not going to run over the details, but I have recommendations for actual implementation of some of these things in this handout that I've prepared, as well as the legal support which I believe is present for them. So I'm just going to hit the highlights, and I think everybody should have had a copy of my handout, which I think I emailed everybody. If you haven't had it yet, or if you haven't received it, let me know, and I'll make sure you get a copy. The first thing is the appropriacy of a motion to adopt any part of the recommendations by the Zoning Commission. The only thing that really is required is to identify that part that you want to approve in such a way as to just simply by adopt the proposed changes described by a specified red line in the document presented to the City Council, and approve it with the following exceptions, and here you would insert whatever changes you may feel would be appropriate. The changes, as far as I can tell, still do not address the Federal Religious Land Use Act to resolve conflicts. There is still a conflict between Section 50-61 and 50-497, and that should be resolved in whatever changes are put forward. If there's a question as to how that is to be interpreted, and I have case law here cited for the method for interpretation, all that's required to clarify the intent is to revise the heading of Section 50-497B to read as follows, quote, "The uses allowable in Section A are set out in Section 50-61, period. In all other districts, the following uses may be requested," and then you go on to the enumerated exceptions allowed under 50-497B. In addition, the special use permits authorized in Section 50-61B, I believe, should be reduced or altogether eliminated to reduce conflict with the Religious Land Use Act in favor of specific non-discretionary rules with consideration and perhaps redistricting for those SUPs already granted or subject to exceptions already agreed to. In any case, the zoning code should be rewritten to remove all discretionary exceptions to the zoning regulations in those residential areas which the city wants to protect from significant changes in status. There's still several sections starting with 50-36F, 50-65, 50-66, and 51-34, which propose minimum percentage limitations on various kinds of construction materials, which I believe still violates current state law. With regard to 1- and 2-story professional office buildings, office districts, it's not resolved whether we really want to have or to allow residences in those areas. Those two sections, dealing with 1- and 2-story office professional, need to be clarified to specify whether we're going to allow them or not. I don't have an argument either way, but the current situation with the ordinances is not clear, and it needs to be clarified and that unclarity resolved. I believe Section 50-590 should be revised to agree with Section 50-539 as revised by City Council ordinance in 2019 for the same reasons. I've set forth some legal arguments that I think are related to it. I think Section 50-649 should be deleted. It's the one that requires the use of Robert's Rules of Order as described in the most recent edition of the book. This should be deleted and a section added to Chapter 2 of the code establishing local rules and/or use of Robert's Rules of Order as may be modified for city use by all city committees, commissions, and boards. I think that solves that problem. There is still a question as to the 50-07. I've set forth in my handout some significant arguments here on it, not the least of which is the fact that Section 31-2000 has already been recodified in Sections 50-616 through 622 of the current code. Instead, I recommend the second and a new third sentence of the current code's Section 50-07 be modified to read as follows, quote, "Before taking any such action, the City Council shall request and consider the recommendation of the Zoning Commission, period. If the Zoning Commission fails to respond with a written recommendation by the end of 60 days following the request, the recommendation shall be presumed to be a negative one, and the City Council may proceed to a vote on that basis." Further, I believe that we still need the assistance of a qualified professional with land use experience to assist us with a decent preparation of the revisions to the Chapter 50 code. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Do we have anybody else? Okay, it is 7:13. We're going to close the public hearing. Move on to item number 3, discussion and possible action on a recommendation by the Zoning Commission to the City Council on amendments to Chapter 50 of the Code of Ordinances based on recommendations from the Zoning Review Committee. Mr. Rapley.
Yes, Mayor. As a follow-up to our special City Council meeting on February 3rd, 2020, and following Council's direction, I had reached out to our chairman of the Zoning Commission. I had sent him an email prior to the zoning meeting on Tuesday night relaying Council's request. I received a reply from Chairman Rodriguez. He would not prepare or deliver presentations requested due to the advice of his council. As an alternate choice to the chairman, I had reached out to Ms. Baker since she had been a longstanding member and served on prior and current zoning commission and has had the historical knowledge, the development of these additions and amendments to Chapter 50. I received a call last week from Ms. Baker. She was not available due to attend tonight and possible scheduling conflicts in the coming months. As I indicated to council on Friday, I made you all aware of Chairman Rodriguez's position and wanted to let you know that I was waiting to hear from Ms. Baker, which I heard via email on Saturday that she was going to be unavailable. As I indicated in my correspondence to council as an option, Mr. Schnall and I could work cooperatively to prepare a comprehensive report summarizing these amendments and additions related to Chapter 50 at a future council meeting. Obviously that Mr. Schnall and I just need some time to prepare as an option if you wanted us to do that, or if you decide another designee to attend and present to council on Chapter 50.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Ms. Winger?
Yes, As I said before, I'd like to move to approve. This is something the zoning commission, both the prior zoning commission, the current zoning commission, have spent a great deal of time on. A great deal of time was invested with the zoning review committee, which was in fact chaired by a professional. That was Mr. Mark Schnall. And I think it's time to go ahead and pass it, so I move to approve.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have a discussion? Mr. May.
Mr. Mayor, I'm opposed to taking any action today. My father was famous for saying that if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing right. And I think proceeding tonight is not in the city's best interest. Mr. McCormick has laid out a number of points where we need a deeper dive. We do not have a land use expert that's weighed in. We don't have the integration of the Religious Land Use Act. We do not have an amelioration with the competing types of interpretations in various parts of this code. And in our past discussion, city council members have complained that they don't have the exact language in front of them on which to make intelligent decisions. That needs to be done right down to the very syllable. So I'm opposed to proceeding forward. There is not a single person on zoning commission present to be responsive to our individual questions. We've not heard that. So I think this is not ready for prime time, as they say, and I'm not in favor of proceeding with a vote on any of these recommendations tonight.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Isbrand.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I would echo Mr. May's comments, and while I appreciate the interest in us revising our ordinance, I think we've seen abundant evidence that we're not quite there yet. We're close, but we're not quite there. I will say that of all of us seated on the dais here today, the person that's most vested in this, if you will, pardon me for saying it this way, is me, who as chairman of the Zoning Commission helped to navigate a good portion of this to where it is, but was not there for the completion of it. I am very anxious to see us adopt a good ordinance, but I believe there is abundant evidence that we are not quite there yet. I do not by any means wish to be dismissive of the current zoning commission or the previous zoning commission or the zoning review committee that invested so much time, so much good quality work in this document. But I don't think that anyone can reasonably look at these 75 pages, hear the concerns that are coming from the public, try to navigate through with what this document now says, receive no report from the zoning commission to explain where it's come from, and then be expected to approve this. So I would concur. I do not believe that we are ready to do so, and I hope that council will do that, give that due consideration tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Isbrand. Ms. Winger.
Well, Mr. Isbrand, we know where it comes from. It came from the Zoning Review Committee. It went to the Zoning Commission. As you know, I pointed out, this Zoning Commission had 3 public hearings on it, giving everybody ample time. They did it in segments, as Mr. May previously suggested we should do. They already did that. So whoever was interested went. You had it subsequently under your chairmanship for 2 years. What else are we waiting for? When will we be ready?
Mr. Mayor, may I respond to that question?
I'm going to get to Mr. Sanderson first because he hasn't spoken.
Certainly.
Certainly, in any assemblage of humans, no law is perfect. We are not going to be able to go ahead and execute any kind of perfect law here in this chambers. I think it's time for us to go ahead and step up, execute, and let the zoning, let that zoning recommendation go forward. I see nothing wrong with something that is, everything that I've seen so far seems that it is properly done. I see no reason for us not to go ahead and pass it as it is.
Mr. Isbrand.
And thank you, Mr. Sanderson. I appreciate your point of view on that. But to the question of what are we waiting for, I think what we're waiting for is to get this in as good a shape as we possibly can. And again, I will say, I think we are close. I think there are points that have been brought up here that need to be considered before we adopt something. I do not understand the urgency when we are this close, but when we still have significant things to consider, that we would want to rush to completion with this versus doing it right, which I think is far more important than doing it fast.
Thank you, Mr. Isbrand. Mr. Gregory?
This reminds me of a bill that was passed by Congress years ago. Pass it, we'll see what is in it after we pass it. I think there's some, overall, it's quite good, but I think there's some holes in it, and I think you need some clarification here and there. And I think that can be done within a very reasonable period of time. I'd rather not pass this thing in one body until those particular items, and we've been given a notice of several of them, are addressed, thrashed out, and determined whether they have validity or not. With that being the case, I would at least hold this over for a month. But for right now, I'm not at this time ready to pass this.
Ms. Winger?
So, Mr. Gregory, what exactly are you concerned about? Because as I pointed out before, if there's something that you feel still needs to be worked on, then all you have to do is make an amendment to delete that section, and then we can pass the rest of it instead of continuing to kick the can down the road.
You make changes in something, you have to see all the changes taken as a whole to ensure that they work as a whole. You can piecemeal the change, that's true. But if you've seen the documentation that we were given by our city attorney, there's some glaring things that are omitted. And that this is not the time to, right now, is not the time to address all these various things, along with the items that former council member McCormick has mentioned. Some could be mentioned, it could be addressed here now, but most probably could not. And that's how I've reached this conclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Mr. Sanderson?
Most certainly, pretty much at any time in the future, objections can be made to any body of law that's supposed to be passed. I mean, that's for sure. At this point in time, I don't think anybody is stating that what we have here is absolutely perfect. It is a good start, and most certainly as a function of time, we can make modifications as fit. These recommendations come to us from the newly appointed zoning commission. I think we should go ahead and act on them as they are presented. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Schnall, just to clarify, the federal lawsuit that the city is currently under in regards to the Religious Land Use Act has some connection to some of the items in Chapter 50, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So it would be, would it be your opinion that we should amend that to make sure that we're in compliance with the Federal Religious Land Use Act?
I think it would be appropriate as part of the overall review and amendment to the zoning ordinance that appropriate changes be made to put the city in compliance with the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Schnall. To that point, I would say that we would be derelict to pass this amendment knowing that we have substantial conflicts that are currently causing the city money. I would urge council to consider that when you vote. Mr. Sanderson.
Mr. Schnall, will there be anything that would prevent the council from acting upon recommendations from the board in the next 30 days or during the next period here that would go ahead and amend the current set of recommendations?
Mr. Sanderson, I think that by the March meeting, we could, Mr. Rapley and I could reevaluate the comments made not only by Mr. McCormick this evening, but by Mr. McCormick at prior meetings, by Ms. Scott, by Ms. McClinn, and by Mr. Squire at prior meetings of this governing body to incorporate those of their recommendations which are appropriate for incorporation. As an example, Mr. McCormick's commented several times, including tonight, about a relatively minor discrepancy in the provisions concerning the one-story office building and two-story office building portions of the zoning ordinance as recommended by the zoning commission. Those are relatively easy fixes, but it would be cumbersome to try and do them tonight one by one. Ms. Scott had a concern about foster children. That requires a modest definitional change to the definition of family. Mr. McCormick and I have a different opinion from each other about some of the other things that he's recommended. I do need to vet those out and try and get those done. The Zoning Commission was given the opportunity, the current Zoning Commission was given the opportunity at a meeting on February 4 to make a recommendation on an amendment to Section 50-497. The Zoning Commission declined to make a recommendation on that item. Therefore, that item will be on the next agenda for the next Zoning Commission meeting for them to have another bite at that apple to try and see if they can bring a recommendation to the governing body in regard to Section 50-497. That is the probably the most important ordinance, most important section of the zoning code that should be reviewed and modified to bring the city into compliance with the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000. And those are the things I can kind of remember.
So in general, the answer is yes. I mean, we can make these changes next month, whatever changes that need to be done, in addition to whatever the changes are happening now.
Well,
is that correct?
To make a change to 50-497, the Zoning Commission needs to make a recommendation to the governing body. That recommendation can be to make no changes. That recommendation can be to make a change.
And certainly that's good. We're going to have a zoning commission meeting between now and the March meeting, of course.
Excuse me, sir?
So, a zoning commission meeting is scheduled and will be scheduled between now and the March meeting, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir. So that the Zoning Commission will have an opportunity, I believe it will be on March 3, would have its regular monthly meeting on the first Tuesday of March, and then anything that comes out of that meeting would be automatically coming before the governing body on March 10th, and we will try to have a updated proposal to the governing body that incorporates consideration and implementation of many of the comments made, as I said earlier, many of the comments made by Mr. McCormick, Ms. McLean, Ms. Scott, and Mr. Squire, to the extent they appear to be appropriate to Mr. Rapley and to me. And if any members of the governing body have any additional concerns or requests, since we heard from the public at the public hearing, if any member of the governing body has any specific recommendations about other modifications, if they could get those to Mr. Rapley within the next week or 10 days, that will facilitate our being able to get everything done and wrap this up. There was a question about the Zoning Review Committee. I thank Ms. Wenger for her generous comment earlier. I did chair that committee. I am board certified in residential real estate law and commercial real estate law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I am a specialist in those areas. The Zoning Review Committee's work was summarized in a memorandum and 6 or 7 exhibits that I believe Mr. Rapley circulated to the governing body, and I would be glad to attempt to answer questions about those materials. But I think the real question is what the Zoning Commission brought to the governing body, because the Zoning Commission had that information. They went through it, they vetted it, they came and brought to the governing body last December their recommendations that considered what the Zoning Review Committee had to say and recommended, and now it's before the governing body. So I do think we can provide a more complete product that takes into consideration the comments made earlier, both this evening and at prior public hearings by the governing body, and have a document that I hope all the members of the governing body, to use Mr. May's phrase, will be ready for prime time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schnall. Ms. Winger.
Yes, Mr. Schnall, so do you know why the zoning commission did not act on that particular religious land use issue?
I cannot tell you why. I don't know why. I sat in this room,
They just
and they did not
declined.
take action.
Okay, well, the only thing that I would ask is that, the zoning commission is something that's established by state law, and it should not be supplanted by other people. They are the ones that make the recommendation to council. The council can accept it, amend it, whatever we want to do, but we need to get going on this because it's just been hanging there for over 3 years. Lots of people put a lot of effort in, including you and your zoning commission, and Mr. Schnall and his zoning review committee, and it just seems ridiculous. Well, we need more time, we need more time. So I think that should be it. If you don't want to act tonight, it should definitely be done by the next meeting, and anybody who has anything to say should be going to the zoning commission and letting them know and see what they have to say, and then you can come. But for somebody who doesn't go to just keep coming in here and giving us changes and supplanting the zoning commission, that includes the city manager and the city attorney, that's not supposed to happen. The zoning commission is supposed to act, and they're supposed to make the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms.
I
Winger.
believe a vote is on the, were we supposed to be taking a vote?
As soon as we hear from the citizens, we heard. Mr. McCormick, you're signed up.
Clyde McCormick, 207 Carrollwood. I would encourage the council to allow proper time for making this a good document rather than just a rushed job. There's no point in rushing into something and discourage the council from a rushed action. Secondly, I'm not at all sure that we're quite ready for any action at the moment because, as I understood what Mr. Trevino said, we were looking at the zoning review board document. I don't know if we've received a formal recommendation from the zoning commission yet, and without that, according to 50-07, the council cannot proceed. 50-07, as it's currently written, prohibits the council from taking any action to change or revise any statute or any ordinance in Chapter 50 without having received and considered the recommendation of the zoning commission. The zoning commission has been, let's say, pretty clear in their intent not to be present or to make such a recommendation in person, and they've not presented the people here who are able to respond to council questions and important considerations which should be taken at this point. So I recommend the council decline to proceed with a vote affirming any portion of the proposed changes to Chapter 50, notwithstanding Mr. Sanderson's vehement argument in favor of proceeding with alacrity and Ms. Winger's urge to speed along. I agree that it should be done. It needs to be done as quickly as reasonably possible, but reasonably possible is an important qualifier. So I encourage the council to take time to do what is proper to be done and to do a good document rather than just something we can throw at the wall and hope something sticks in the end and we can change later on, even though we know now that there are changes that need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Okay, we have a motion on the table. We're going to wait for Ms. Winger to join us. There we go. Okay, so we had a motion by Ms. Winger, a second by Mr. Sanderson. All in favor?
I'll just go and clarify what we're voting on. So what does a positive vote mean?
Ms. Craig, can you clarify that for us? Or Ms. Winger, would you like to clarify your motion?
The motion was to pass the recommendation from the zoning commission.
Thank you so much. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, it fails 3-2. We're moving on to item number 4, discussion and possible action to ratify the ratify adoption of ordinance number 2020010114, calling an election for the city of Castle Hills, Texas, to elect 3 aldermen, making provisions for the conduct of the election, resolving other matters incident and related to such election, and providing an effective date. Ms. Craig.
Thank you. This item was approved by the City Council at the last meeting, January 14th, and has been signed by Mayor Trevino. The Spanish heading of the ordinance on the January 14th agenda had been copied from a previous agenda. Computers do get you in trouble sometimes. And it was incorrect. It incorrectly stated that we were electing a mayor and 2 council members. It should have stated to elect 3 council members. The ordinance in the January 14th agenda packet was adopted by council, and it was correct. It was only the Spanish heading on the agenda itself that was incorrect. And as a matter of caution, the staff has brought this back on the agenda to ratify adoption of the ordinance previously approved by the City Council. And again, the ordinance you adopted is correct. It was just the heading on the agenda.
Thank you so much, Ms. Craig. Do we have a motion?
Motion to accept as written.
Thank you so much. First and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you so much, council. Discussion, item number 5, discussion of possible action on ordinance number 2020-02-11-A to repeal current Chapter 30 of the Code of Ordinances and adopt a new Chapter 30 to create 1 permanent commission to be named the Parks and Projects Commission, to define duties and responsibilities of the Parks and Projects Commission, to set rules and procedures, and to establish an effective date. Mr. Gregory.
This merges 2 firms, the Parks Projects Commission and the Ad Hoc Commission, into 1. And within this ordinance, it set forth how it should be set up and various requirements for the commission members and who nominates whom. This is necessary because this is a very interesting and unique commission, the Ad Hoc Commission. It's sort of like an ideas commission, and they've had some remarkable ideas that have come out of this. Some don't go anywhere, but some are rather remarkable. And it's sort of a buffer to bring good ideas to the City Council from a third-party group. I think it is. There are exceptional people on it right now. I think these are 2 good commissions. The Parks Commission is headed by Mr. Udemeyer. The Ad Hoc Committee is headed by Mr. Squire. This merges it into 1, and I recommend this for the consideration of the council.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Second.
That was a motion. We have a second. Any discussion?
Before we do, Mayor, I'd just like to say, because I know that there's several members of both committees and commissions that are here tonight, and I think would be remiss if we took this action without pausing for a moment to thank you all for the incredible work that you have done on your separate committees. So, Mr. Booth, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Squire, Mr. Judemeyer, thank you all, and to those others who have served. You've done a remarkable job. Look forward to the continued great counsel that you provide to us, so thank you.
Thank you for catching that, Mr. Isabran. I echo your sentiments. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Mayor,
3 to...
I think
no.
each chairman of each committee had a statement, if possible.
By all means.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. A little bit after the fact, but thank you for first of all, thank you for your support of these committees. We try to do things in a nonpartisan, non-political way the best we possibly can. I'm sure Douglas has witnessed that we're here to do the work and not to play the games. But obviously, we support both myself as chairman of the Ad Hoc Project Committee and Bernard as chairman of the Parks Committee. Both agreed and supported this. We talked about it extensively. Mr. McCormick did the lion's share of trying to put the ordinance together with Councilman Gregory's oversight. And so we thank you for that, and thank you for a positive move forward for the city.
Thank you all again. Okay, that was 3 to 2, so that passed.
4 to 1.
4.
No, 3 to 2.
Oh, it was 3 to 2.
I thought, okay, we're good. Item number 6, discussion of possible action on waiving the prohibition against the sale or consumption of alcoholic beverages within 300 feet of a church or public school during Fiesta Castle Hills event on April 18th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve and a second. Do we have a discussion? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Item number 7, discussion of possible action on resolution number 2020-02-11A, authorizing the city to enter into interlocal agreement between the City of Castle Hills and San Antonio Water System to facilitate Castle Hills improvement of streets and infrastructure, and authorizing the city manager to execute such an agreement. Mr. Rapley.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the ILA with SAWS for their part of the Banyan Glen Tower project. Just like we did with the Antler project for advanced funding for the utility work that they need to do on the project. This is in the same manner and the same conduit to do the ILA to get the advanced funding from SAWS in order to proceed with the project that was approved by council previously for the Banyan Glen Tower.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Ms. Winger.
So this is simply that every time we go into something, it's not an overall thing where we have this agreement, which is what I understood here, but this is specifically for a project. Is that correct?
This ILA is specifically for the Banyan
Okay.
Glen Tower project only.
Thank you.
Just like a few years ago when I think the Danube project, Antler, and now this one particularly.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley.
I go ahead and make a motion to accept it as written.
Second.
So much. First and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Item number 8, discussion of possible action on resolution number 2020-02-11B, authorizing the city to enter an interlocal agreement between the City of Castle Hills and CPS Energy to facilitate Castle Hills improvement of streets and infrastructure, and authorizing the city manager to execute such an agreement. Mr. Rapley?
Again, Mayor, this is specific for the Banyan Glen Tower project. CPS is going to be doing some utility work as well, and so this is for the interlocal for, they joint bidded with us, same as SAWS. In this one in particular, as we move forward, as the work is completed, they will reimburse the city, which is slightly different from advancing. So this is just part of the process to get this ILA done for this project on the part that CPS is doing on Banyan.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve in a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Item number 9, discussion of possible action to authorize entry by municipal court into an interlocal cooperation contract for the failure to appear program with the Texas Department of Public Safety, and to authorize a municipal judge to sign such interlocal cooperation contract. Mr. Rapley.
Mayor, this is a program that needs to be renewed annually. This is for the failure to appear program. Since it has to do with our municipal court, we are asking that the municipal court judge has the authorization to take part in this for our failure to appear program.
Who currently takes part?
Can you repeat that, Ms. Winger?
Who currently takes part? You said this is renewal. Who currently does it?
We currently have a failure to appear program, and we're just renewing this annually, and we have to do it because it's an interlocal cooperation contract from the state.
But the municipal judge has never been in charge of it before?
I is assuming, because this is a court of record, that now that this has to be done, and due to some legislative changes, this is the process that we follow now, and cities follow for this failure to appear program.
Well, I just have a problem because if this is going to be, you know, something that we're entering into an interlocal agreement, I don't understand why you as the city manager wouldn't be the person to sign it. That's what's supposed to happen.
The reason that the municipal judge we're recommending that the municipal judge sign this agreement is because the agreement is between the state agency and the municipal court rather than between the state agency and the City of Castle Hills. It does require, however, that the municipal court, it says the parties certify that the contract is authorized by the governing body of each party. That's why it's before the governing body of the city to authorize the municipal judge to sign the agreement on behalf of the municipal court.
I understand that, Mr. Schnall, and that's why I asked the question, because Mr. Rapley said that this was a renewal. And if so, that would mean that the municipal judge would have signed it previously, and that appears not to be the case, so I would like to know why.
I can't speak to what has happened in the past. It may be because the court is now a court of record. It may be because the Department of Public Safety changed the wording of the agreement. I don't recall this being acted on by the council at this time of the year in 2019, but this is what we have before us, and it seemed upon review that since the state agency calls for the parties to certify that the entry into the agreement is approved by the governing body, and since the agreement is with the municipal court, that the presiding officer of the municipal court, meaning the municipal judge, signed this agreement. We certainly can go back and check the last time a similar failure to appear agreement was executed, but tonight the action requested is to authorize the entry into the agreement and execution by the municipal judge as the appropriate officer to act on behalf of our municipal court.
Well, again, you know, as was discussed in a previous item, it appears that there are several possibilities as to why this may be changing, and at the present time, you don't actually have the answer. It may be because it's court of record. It may be because the state changed the rules. I think we ought to know that before we agree to it. I'm very uncomfortable turning something over that, you know, as far as I'm concerned, should be handled by the city manager and not by somebody who we contract with.
Thank you, Ms. Winger. Mr. Sanderson.
So is this an agreement that has to be signed on an annual basis? Is this renewable? Is this a permanent instrument? Is this done judge by a judge? What is the, you know, I guess I'm kind of confused about, you know, why, or you know, is this something that has to be authorized by council for the municipal judge to actually do the signature? A little bit of description on the details there might be useful for those that are listening.
Again, I don't know exactly the process of what changed. I mean, we can get that information to council. It was my understanding.
I'm not really concerned about what's changed. I'm actually concerned about currently now, what we're doing now and why we're doing it now. I don't care about what happened in the past. Doesn't bother me. So what's happening now is like, is it annual? Is it like per court? So, and what are the, is there a downside for us to go and sign this when it comes to or perhaps some potential legal exposure that we might have as for signing this particular document, if anything at all?
Mr. Sanderson, I don't think there is any downside to the city entering into this interlocal agreement with the Texas Department of Public Safety. The transmittal letter was sent, dated January 10, sent to the court administrator of the municipal court, and it begins with, "Enclosed, please find the revised contract offered by the Texas Department of Public Safety to accommodate Chapter 706 of the Texas Transportation Code." So the reason it's here is because it's been revised by the Department of Public Safety. I don't know what changes were made, but that's what their cover letter says. Having reviewed this document, it seems like it's an appropriate document that provides benefit to the city to facilitate information that will allow the warrant officer to address and serve warrants to people who have failed to appear in court when they've been cited, and that's a source of revenue for the city. So it seems to me that it would be appropriate to act on this and get it completed. Then Mr. Rapley can follow up and look at whatever prior agreement there was, can inquire with the Department of Public Safety what the revisions were, if they're not easily identifiable, but that moving forward with it seems to be appropriate since it does have the potential to provide additional revenue to the city.
So a quick question was, did the chief actually want to make a statement about this? I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm just kind of curious. You're walking back and forth here, so any additional information that you can provide to this body would be great.
Yes, sir, Councilman. There's a key component here. This acts as a mechanism for denying the renewal of a driver's license. which is the number one, I suppose, catalyst or impetus for getting the warrant fees or collections taken care of and affected. If that clears it up, that's really what this is doing for us.
So
And
this sounds like a structural mechanism right here for y'all to be able to do your job. Is that
It's
what
more of
you-
a clearing, but yes, okay, that is one way of looking at it conceptually. It's a clearinghouse that actually sends the data to the state that says deny the renewal of this offender until they take care of these warrants with the city of Castle Hills. And it does it for every city that participates, and I don't know of a city that doesn't. There's probably a few.
That's what
But
I
it's a,
said.
Councilman, if you can add to that as
Mr.
well.
May, I imagine you have some experience.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to actually accept it as written, but
It's a good program.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sanderson. Mr. May?
Well, I just wanted to mention that I've had clients in the past that have been rounded up at very little expense because of the same.
That's right.
Same effort. And so this actually saves money. I want to
does.
express my appreciation to the city manager for being on top of this and bringing it to the attention of council. And with that, I move that we adopt this proposal as stated in the heading.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. May.
I believe Mr. Sanderson.
Okay.
Well, I still have a question. I didn't hear an answer from Chief Siemens. I don't know what the change is, and, we seem to be so concerned about that on something that's been worked on for 3 years. This is just coming to us. What happens, why can't we get an answer as to why it has to be the municipal judge versus the city manager? That's my question.
Hold on, Chief. Chief, and you can answer this, that we've always participated in this program
That's
along
correct.
with other cities.
That's correct.
And so if you'd like, council, I think this has to do with the component of fees related to how it's shared between the state and the failure to fee program.
That's correct. Nothing
And-
really changes. They just altered some fees.
And if
The
that's
sharing is about
possible,
the
I'll
same.
follow up to get you exactly what those particular changes are. But again, we're just moving forward because the governing body needs approval and we want to maintain this program for failure to appear.
To answer your question,
And I
Councilwoman.
agree, and I agree with everything everybody said. It sounds like a very good program, and no question we should continue it. I'm uncomfortable with assigning a contractor, which is what the municipal judge is, to be signing something for the city. That's what I'm uncomfortable with.
Well, Ms. Winger, I think I can add to that the judge is a municipal officer of the city,
That's
and
right.
everything happens, Ms. Winger, excuse me, everything happens under him, and he is ultimately responsible for the court. So for him to sign off, he's an agent of the city. Mr. Schnall, would you like to clarify?
I agree with that, Mayor. Again, the agreement is with the municipal court of the city of Castle Hills. The appropriate person to sign a document on behalf of the municipal court of the city of Castle Hills is the presiding judge of that court. That is the reason why the agenda states and why the recommended action is to authorize the entry into the agreement and to authorize the sitting judge, the presiding judge, to execute the agreement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Schnall. We have a first and a second by Mr. May. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, passes 4-1. Item number 10, discussion and possible action on resolution number 2020-02-11C, authorizing the city of Castle Hills to participate in the Texas Smart Buy membership program with the Comptroller of Public Accounts and authorizing the mayor and city manager to execute the resolution.
So moved.
Mr. Rapley.
Mayor, this is just another portal or conduit for the city to take part in procurement purchases, just like other ones we're in for cooperative purchasing. One of the main things we want to look at too for benefit through the state is our fuel. We've been looking at how we can be more efficient on our fuel, and this might actually help decrease the cost of our fuel to our fleet vehicles, police, fire, and public works by being a part of this.
Okay, thank you for bringing this forward, Mr. Rapley. We have a motion by Ms. Winger,
Second.
a second by Mr. May. We have any discussion?
Yes. Quick question. So will this particular program cost us any money? Do we have to go ahead and write a check to somebody to go in to take part in this program?
It's in the AgendaCom. The annual membership is $100, and it's basically a subscription or due under the administration.
Sam's Club for cities? I mean, it's
Costco, but it's $100 for the subscription.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, No further questions. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you so much. On to number 11, discussion and possible action authorizing the city manager and city attorney to prepare and have published a request for proposals for the digital billboard signage for Northwest Loop 410 in the city right-of-way.
Real quick, I'm going to dismiss police, fire, public works.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor, sorry. This is in regards to authorizing the city attorney and myself to go out again for a request for proposals for digital billboard sign. We've had a few more inquiries on possibilities of sites, and so we want to be able to put it out there again and see what proposals we get and bring it back to City Council. I think there's a digital billboard committee that would review this as previously done in years past and see what proposals we get through our competitive process.
Thank you. And just to clarify, this in no way, shape, or form commits the city to anything.
No, we're just seeing, again, who wants to bid on certain proposals or sites. Obviously, that right now, the way it's established is these digital billboard revenue provides street and drainage infrastructure, which is what the city needs right now based on a number of projects in the pipeline.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Ms. Winger?
What is the location of the sign? Oh, you don't know?
Ms. Winger, the way it works is the respondents will propose a location, so
I
it's
see.
up for whoever is going to respond.
Okay.
A
So
motion
move
to
approve.
accept as written.
Thank you. We have a motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. May. No further discussion. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Okay, item number 12. Discussion and possible action to discontinue city engagement of Mark Anthony Sanchez as the employment law attorney.
I have a question about this. We have actually never signed anything with Mark Anthony Sanchez, and he has never billed the city, so it seems to me to be a moot point.
Mr. Schnall, would you like to weigh in on that?
It's my recollection that the city council did take action by a motion, I think on or about July 1st of 2019, to engage the services of Mr. Sanchez as an outside employment attorney. It really doesn't matter that there isn't a written agreement or that Mr. Sanchez has been asked to do anything. The way I read this agenda item, it's simply for, if the council was so inclined, to discontinue whatever agreement was made or whatever, to discontinue any engagement of Mr. Sanchez that was effectuated by the prior action in or about July 1st of last year.
And so what is the advantage of taking this action at this time? Since if we don't take any action, nothing changes and there's no cost.
I personally just didn't know why we would have an ongoing external attorney when our city attorney has that specialty.
No, he does not.
Ms. Winger. Okay, excuse me. Our city attorney has that specialty in his office. So under the office of Langley and Benak, they hold that specialty. So I don't understand why we're going to hire a separate attorney.
Well, the only reason that we did it initially, as you may recall, is because we actually talked to Mr. Schnall before doing it, and he did not want to recommend anybody, including from his own firm.
I don't recall being asked that at all.
Either do I.
I do.
And I
We had
also
a
have a little bit of conflict that this city attorney was brought in specifically at your request without a formal request for proposals or qualifications. Mr. May?
Mr. Mayor, the reason you formally disassociate from any discussions or probability of engaging a certain attorney is to prevent future conflict. And so I think to make it very clean, we're not using the services of this attorney. We have no intent to use the services of this attorney. And whether there were informal discussions or formal, I think we make it formal tonight. And I move that we adopt the action as stated.
Thank you, Mr. May. Okay, question.
Mr. Schnall, is it required that RFPs are created or distributed or announced to go ahead and to retain the services of an attorney for the city.
There's no requirement for there to be an RFP.
Thank you.
I'd second the motion.
Okay, we have a second for the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion passes 3-2. On to old business. Item number 13, consider an act on an appointment to the Architectural Review Committee. Mr. Gregory.
This is my lone appointment. David Lewis, who I'm nominating. His family is entrenched here in Castle Hills, been here a long time. Mr. Lewis is a builder. He's well versed in architectural procedures, and I nominate him for the committee.
You appoint him.
I appoint him to the committee. Yes, that's stand corrected.
Mr. Gregory, I'm sorry, can you repeat his name? I missed it.
David Lewis.
Okay.
You might say where he lives.
Okay, Mr. Schnall, do we have to vote on Mr. Gregory's appointment, or is that automatically done?
No, we don't any longer. We
I
changed
believe
the
we vote,
rules.
and I'll second it.
Let me just clarify if we're good with that.
Mayor, I don't have a copy of the revised
Well, the revised
provision to
rules don't
Chapter
call
8.
Winger,
for it.
please. Mr. Schnall, I'm sorry for the interruption.
Mr. Rapley is seeing if he's got the current text of Chapter 8 here, which is on the board of it, on the Architectural Review Commission. I frankly just do not remember whether the appointments to the Architectural Review Committee are done by a simple appointment or whether Mr. Gregory's naming of Mr. Lewis is a nomination that gets seconded and voted on. Out of an abundance of caution for the moment, my inclination would be to say that Mr. Gregory should make a motion to appoint Mr. Lewis. If it gets seconded, then it can be voted on and move forward. I just did not bring a copy of that section of the code with me today.
Not a problem, Mr. Schnall. Out of an abundance of caution, Ms. Winger, please.
Mr. Gregory was the one who introduced the format that we're currently using, so he should be able to answer it. But I do recall, and he appoints because he, as a council member, has the right to appoint, and that's it. It's a regular member. We vote on all.
But, Ms. Wenger, I will agree with you if the language in regard to the members of the Architectural Review Committee are handled in the same way as the appointments to the Board of Adjustment, because you are correct that the statute on the ordinance on the Board of Adjustment says each alderman shall appoint one member whose place on the committee shall correspond to the place of the appointing alderman. So if, in fact, the Architectural Review Committee amendment to Chapter 8 on the selection of members of the Architectural Review Committee is consistent with that for the Board of Adjustment, then Mr. Gregory can simply appoint Mr. Lewis, and it's a done deal.
Okay. Well, then, Mr. Lewis is there. Announcements by mayor and council. Mr. Isbrand?
In the interest of setting precedent that would go through 13 items in a little more than 90 minutes, I'll decline saying anything else, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Isbrand. Mr. Sanderson?
90 minutes, 13 items, that's great. That's it.
Mr. May?
Very briefly, as my new custom, the next councilman Meet Your Councilman evening office hours will be at Swazdi Thai Cuisine, and that will be the first Tuesday of March, which is March 3rd, at 6407 Blanco Road, Swazdi. They have a room all for us, and the manager's 100% in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. May. Ms. Winger?
Yes, I'd just like to say that we lost a very important member of our community, Judge Ray Olivari, who passed away last month. His rosary was held just to indicate how honorable he was at San Fernando Cathedral, and it was attended by every member of the judiciary in Bexar County.
Thank you, Ms. Winger. Mr. Gregory? I just want to add that the offices will be closed this coming Monday, so if you be mindful that your trash services may differ and you may make any arrangements as necessary. Thank you all so much for joining us. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion, seconded.
First and second, all in favor? Good night.